have a question then. So how are they supposed to do it then? If this is an option and we all know it's not a good option, because that's not a good option to ever let the kids be on my computer. So how are they supposed to do it if that's an option they don't choose?
Can I just make a point of clarification too? And I don't know that we said this on Friday it was. It's not necessarily when you're doing Volusia Live, does it have to be the teacher's computer that they log on to? Is that correct, Dr. Okay, I thought so.
So are we expecting now that we're going to have a surplus of computers and we're going to have extra ones that we can just prop up in the corner and run those?
Well, we do have student computers on campus.
But wouldn't the students be engaged in using all of that? I mean, I thought that's part
I think it would depend on the class, whether or not they're, I mean, I think it would depend on the class.
Because I just thought that was one of the reasons why we were so fixated on brick and mortar, was because we didn't have enough devices to ensure that every student who needed one had access to one in case we had to do some kind of school closure again.
Right, but I'm talking about, and this is, and Dr. Nairn, jump in and tell me if I'm understanding this wrong, because I know that this was something that that we had discussed on Friday. It does not necessarily mean that every single, so if I'm teaching a class and every student's not on a computer, you could use one of the student computers to facilitate that Zoom or Teams session with the Volusia Live students. It wouldn't have to be the teacher computer that's logged on, because I do understand that concern. Like if I'm giving my computer, I'm logged in, I've already typed in my password, to give that computer over to a student, certainly that is a valid concern.
But that's not the only concern. How do I work on my computer while I'm also trying to watch kids on the computer? In other words, I don't think they have multiple screens. So how am I supposed to work and project things up onto my board, my smart board, all those kinds of things, if I'm also supposed to be watching these students and watching the ones in my classroom? Now you've got my attention divided in 3 different directions.
Come on. I mean, again, it was a suggestion that was used in a training. It was not a mandate. And I spoke with, I mean, I can just speak to a teacher that I spoke with this weekend, who was a Volusia Live teacher, that was talking to me about how she intended to do it. And she had a student computer that she was utilizing for the Teams or Zoom session. It's certainly not mandated across the board. And I do think that there's going to have to be, like Dr. Nairn said, conversations with teachers on campus to talk about what individual comfort levels are and what equipment is on different campuses, because I've been on a couple of different campuses and I had different equipment at each campus that I went to, based on just whether they were Title I, whether they were not Title I, and what services they had. So I think it's more of an individual problem solving issue than across the board statement.
Well, but I think that, but what you just said a minute ago, I think is critically important, that it's not mandated. And Dr. Raimondo pointed out that both of the training issues that we brought forward on Friday were suggestions or optional. So I want to be very clear, because we actually have a school board policy that prohibits students being able to use teachers' devices and having access to the electronic information system. I mean, my goodness, some of our savvy little tykes, think of the havoc they could wreak. And so we don't want to ever put them in a position where they would have that extra access. So I think the most important message for this time, so we're going to let the record reflect that teachers and support professionals are not mandated to have the Volusia Buddy, someone monitoring Volusia Live students from their device, nor are PE teachers mandated to take their computer outside in search of a Wi-Fi signal if they're going to conduct a lesson outside.
Yeah, we're fine. Record reflected accordingly. And I did look at Dr. Kellemeyer had sent me the click sheet that I think that information came from. And it was, in fact, it also included if you can't do this, if there isn't a spot where Wi-Fi, there was a scenario in which how to make assignments and then go outside with the rest of the class and not have to use that Wi-Fi. So that is, it was a suggestion and optional.
But I still have to say that, okay, good, we've solved that for PE, but I still have to say that we have not solved the problem. The elephant in the room is doing two jobs, doing it safely, making sure kids aren't doing something they're not supposed to do, making sure they're not exposed to something they shouldn't see, you know, an email or anything that pops up on my screen. There's a lot of, we still haven't given them viable options. We've just given them options that maybe one or two could do because I happen to have an extra computer in my room. I can do it, but we're still not solving the problem for everyone. How do we solve the problem for everyone? How are teachers supposed to do both these platforms at the same time and do the work with rigor and fidelity?
Do you want to take it? You want me to? I can do it.
And I'll show that.
Me? Okay. I'm sorry. We were just looking to see who was going to answer the question. So again, I think that is a really broad statement for me to try to go in deeply. I can tell you about the conversations that I personally have had just this weekend with a teacher who is teaching Volusia Live in this manner. And she said that her administrator actually modeled it with some professional development that they were doing this week, where he had students, which were the teachers in front of him, and he had some on the chat session in the back, and they worked out some of the logistical things, because a lot of it is very, very logistical. As far as how do you, just what you were talking about, how do you display it so that I can see it? How do I wear, we've given each teacher who's teaching Volusia Live will receive a device. I actually have one in my bag, I think, that they can wear on their neck so that they can move around. It's a Bluetooth device that will connect to the computer. And then they can hear they can hear what the students on the computer are saying. They can hear what the class is saying, and it has a microphone attached to it. So that will help tremendously with managing and hearing what's going on in the computer at the same time as you're dealing with your groups. From what I have heard and talked to, there are a lot of similarities with having small group center kind of instruction within the regular classroom.
I got to push back on that. Having been a 3rd and 5th grade, I spend the first whole month just doing rituals and routines in my classroom to make that happen. So you can't enforce rituals and routines to kids who aren't in your classroom during the day. How I have no way to enforce that. If my students did, if we broke up into centers and they misbehaved and played while I was over working with kids at a center, then I had consequences for that. I don't know what kind of consequences I can give. They go to bed early that night. I don't know what kind of consequences I can give to kids on a computer.
Well, and I'd like to just point out, you know, we're meeting through Zoom, and I'm by myself, but you guys have people face to face with you. At the same time, we're trying to facilitate these bargaining sessions through Zoom. So it could sort of kind of be like a Volusia Live scenario. And I noticed that, you know, along the way, we have hiccups, we have bumps, there are distractions that occur in the room that take our attention away momentarily. But Rachel, you and I aren't delivering academic content, and we're not trying to fill gaps that children have from the way we shut down schools last year, which was out of everyone's control. We know that. Nobody planned for that. But these are the circumstances that we're facing. We also are dealing with adults here. And the example that you used for the training that occurred, I guess, last week also involves adults, not children, who over time, you know, if the Volusia Live, they're going to be in front of their screen for about 6 hours a day. That is mind-boggling. I know how wore out I was the one night, and we went 7 hours doing this. I mean, that was just mind boggling. And I have to think about doing that 5 days in a row. At some point, it's going to crack. I mean, at some point, there will be the saturation point, and we're not going to be learning anymore. We're going to be perhaps looking for tomfoolery options. And so for an instructor to have to manage face-to-face, manage kids on the computer, it's a whole lot. And we don't believe it's appropriate for the adults nor the children. But I want to circle back to something. You're talking to somebody, and I'm glad that you're getting practitioner feedback, because that's what we've been asking for all along, right? And so thank you for doing that. I really appreciate it. But I also obtained some, I was listening to somebody too, and I was going back through the board meeting on Tuesday night over the weekend, because, you know, when do you ever have time? But I noticed that Ms. Haynes actually made some really astonishing comments. I was very happy when I was led to them. She was actually Tuesday night advocating and directing the acting superintendent to do some of the things that we've been talking about at the bargaining table here. I heard Ms. Haynes talk about at the elementary level, a dedicated teacher, and then go so far as to say, if the numbers are so low, like, let's use one teacher to serve regional schools. I think she mentioned Ormond Elementary, Ortona, Osceola. That's fabulous, because that's what we've been suggesting, right? We've been trying to get there at the table, and I don't know why we couldn't. I also heard her say at secondary, if you can't find an identified teacher, let's look at class periods. That's what we've been suggesting. So, you know, we met Wednesday, Thursday, Friday last week. That board meeting happened Tuesday, and we have had roadblocks to have these same conversations that I now know a school board member is directing the acting superintendent to explore. So I don't know why we can't get there. And when we have good conversations like we just had about the training stuff, and we get to talk about the bumps in the road, when we hear these things from teachers, we bring them to you, like the training, and it gets explored, and we solve a problem, because we just solved a problem for elementary PE teachers and for Volusia Live teachers, because now they have clarity around the expectation, right? So I think what I'm asking for is to have, let's do this work together. Let's do what Ms. Haynes is directing the acting superintendent to do. Let's solve that problem here. What do you think?
Agreed, but I'm confused. And can I just because the proposal that we sent over to you had dedicated teachers K-5 in that model that we sent, and we've sent that prior to the board meeting on Tuesday. And it also had a mechanism in there directing secondary teachers, directing secondary schools, in fact, requiring them to meet, to look at what models they could do exactly what you described. So I guess what I'm looking for is what additionally would we have put in there that...
Well, okay, and so I'm looking at what I believe you sent over most recently. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have a dedicated teacher. It says parties agree that elementary classroom teachers shall be given a choice to teach. And then it had face-to-face or Volusia Live based on the following criteria. I'm looking for explicit.
One or the other.
Yeah, I need it to be easy. I'm sorry, I'm a little simple. I need it to be real easy. I need it to be spelled out explicitly so there are no questions about it, right? And so there's that. And then the language that came over about secondary was very vague. I felt that it cut VIEW out of the process. I don't understand why there is an aversion to allowing VIEW, particularly the VIEW president, whoever it will be at the time, right, to have say-so with an assistant superintendent to vet the plans that come out of the schools. I absolutely am all for putting teams together at the school sites, but we need to have somebody representing VIEW who knows the contract to have an informed conversation. We certainly wouldn't want anyone to waste their time creating a mechanism that doesn't work, right? But the language that was sent over, I felt, or our team felt, cut us out. So we proposed alternative language that was rejected. So I don't know why View is being removed from the process. It feels like a, go ahead.
Okay, well, first of all, and I just want to clarify, I want to go back to elementary for just a second, and then I do want to talk about secondary. In elementary, it's either face-to-face or Volusia Live. The word or was in there. So if there's something that can make that language clearer, then by all means, tell us what would make that clearer. For secondary, View is included from the get-go as far as the initial meeting. View is a part of that initial meeting. View is provided with the recommendations from the school site. The only thing that we changed was that the View approval for schedules, because View has never approved secondary scheduling or any school schedules. So that's the only thing that has changed. You were included from the initial meeting as far as a partner in that meeting with the teachers, all the way through and provided with the final outcome. And I would think what would be more appropriate than View coming in and approving, like, check, I did it, is that if there is an issue with one, then that would still allow View to be a part of that. I mean, you and I have conversations all the time when something is approved, there's a problem with it. View is the advocate for changing that approval, but they're not part of the approval process.
Well, I think that I see this situation school-based similar to the waiver process, right? Because we've got something in place, we're looking to change it with something else that works for that school community. Very specific, because we don't do across the district waivers. We do MOAs or MOUs in those circumstances, which is what this will eventually be. But when we're doing site-specific work, we typically use the waiver process. And as you know, because we've done a couple together, I think, and we did one when Dr. Dyer went over to Ortona, View is involved as a partner in that process. And we take a look at what the faculty has come up with as an alternative for their site-specific. And then it's never been an issue before. So I don't know why all of a sudden it's an issue at this point in time.
I'd like to take some time to review the waiver language in the contract before I answer that, if that's okay.
Yeah, you can, that's fine. That's fine.
Because now that you say that, I mean, because I guess I wasn't thinking along those lines, because this is not something that we're voting on or that the faculty would be voting on. It's more of a, they come together, they problem solve, and they send it. But are you looking to incorporate some kind of vote?
Well, whatever we craft in this MOA, and if this process is in the MOA, does have to be ratified. So essentially everyone in the bargaining units will be voting on it at this procedural level. And then when it gets down to the schools, we did not talk about a mechanism for them to vote at a site specific plan. I kind of hesitate to do that because I think it just puts another obstacle in the way. I don't want to delay this anymore, because let's face it, the clock is ticking, and I'd like to have some move. I'd like to get this done before the kids come back.
Okay. All right, so that's where we are on those two issues. Or do you want to, I guess I'm trying to say move forward. Do you want us to take a look at secondary language, the secondary live language, and you then look at elementary live language?
Well, so, you know, we submitted a counter on Thursday that was, I guess, for lack of a better word, rejected on Friday. Are you saying you want to go back and look at that again to see if that you want to take a second look at it, or are you wanting us to propose something different?
Do you have anything different to propose, or are you saying that what you would propose would be the same? I know that.
I just don't feel like we got a fair read on the first round. I feel like
we can read that Volusia Live section again. How about that when we caucus? We will look at that again.
Yeah, that would be good. And then, we do have some things I do have some thoughts, but I'd like to get I'd like you to take a look at that again, if you wouldn't mind. Can I ask you about something?
Sure.
Just happened. Got a call from a school, Eastside Elementary School, where the principal has made the statement, okay, due to our numbers, 8 teachers now need to leave. And we talked last week a little bit about, so see, stuff is happening in our schools that is just blowing my mind. So what do we know about that? Because now panic is ensuing across that campus.
I know nothing about that. We have made absolutely no staffing adjustments at all. However, that is something that we can,
I'll text you later.
That'd be fine.
Yep. Okay, good. So if you could take care of that. All right. And then we were told too that CTE instructors who work particularly in gaming, apparently there are courses, maybe Dr. Narig, do you know about this? CTE, they do a gaming course. They were told that they have to develop their own platform. They have to come up with their own platform to do the gaming items for the gaming stuff for the kids. Do you know about that, Dr. Narig? Or, I'll go through you, Rachel, as the chair, chief negotiator.
Sure.
Sorry, I was just going to jump in. That's not a program I'm offering on my campus, so I can't really speak to what those teachers might have been told. There's so many different CTE programs, so I would have to defer back to the rest of the bargaining team. I can only speak to what's happening at Pine Ridge, and we don't have that.
Okay, thank you. Because we had spoken earlier in our bargaining work about how the district would provide all the platforms. Remember, we had kind of talked about that, and I was struggling to come up with a good example, but here's one that's presented itself today.
We'll check with Ms. Castelli and try to get some information on that.
Okay. Getting a lot of questions about these chemicals. So the chemicals that are being provided to clean, apparently they come in big jugs and they're being divvied out. And then there's some information in a training video that says that all products require a label, but then they're being put into different, they're being partitioned into like spray bottles and stuff. And there's a lot of concern about the toxins in the cleaners and the drying time, and then who's actually supposed to do it, because it says, there's some training that says something about children standing up in the last 2 minutes of the class. Kids are supposed to stand behind their desks so that the teachers can go through the room and spray the desks down and then wipe them. Do you know about that?
No.
I'm going to send it to you.
Okay, that'd be great.
I'm going to send that to you. Okay. All right. Well, I feel like at this point, I'd probably like to caucus with my team for just a brief amount of time, because there are some things that we would like to share with you, but I want to make sure, where we're at. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I'd like to caucus too, just to see where we are on that one particular article.
Okay. So would 10 minutes?
Paragraph. I don't know what it's called in there.
Yeah. Article. It's Article 11, waiver language.
Okay.
It's 11. Impressive, isn't it? Right here. Yeah. Okay. So 12:15 or less.
Works for me. Nope, that works for me.
Okay. We'll see you back then.
Thanks.
Thank you. You're muted, Joy.
Of course I am. Tracy, it's good to see you, even though you've got like sunshine in your mouth and your eyes.
If she takes off the background, I can't leave mine on either because it does all that. Just turn off, put the background to none, and then it won't do that. You just have your background.
Okay, I think they're wanting to come in. Here they come.
Okay, we're back on. I think we're back on. Are we back on?
Mm-hmm. Did you get my text, Rachel?
I did.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll look into that. All right. So here's where we are. We did take the two proposals. We went back and I reviewed Article 11 and we had some good discussion. And we do have some changes to that particular section of the MOU that we've made as far as language goes. But what we'd like to do is see what else is really, as far as the proposal that you have, what else is the hard stops for us? What else is holding us up? And let us go back and see if those are issues that we can go back and reconsider, almost like what we just did with that particular article before we present. Because what we don't want to do is just the keep, like, if I submit this to you and then we've got to go back and forth and back and forth, we'd like to present a pretty clean copy if we can get there. So what other sections are we looking at that are just this?
Right. I understand what you're saying. It feels like we're kind of nickel and dime stuff. Let's just get it done, right? Is that what you're saying? Yep, right. I am completely in agreement there, and I appreciate that. So are we talking about secondary, or are we talking about elementary, or are we talking about the whole ball of wax?
I'd like the whole ball of wax.
Oh boy. All right. Well, okay. So
I made this. You can't see this, nope. Obviously, because I don't have it in a shareable. Like, I'm sharing my screen right now, if you can see. But I made a chart of all of the issues in the MOU and went through and color coded them based on, like, do we agree? Do we not agree? And honestly, there's a whole lot more that we agree on than we don't agree on. It feels like we get caught in these long discussions and of things, but there's a whole lot that we do agree on. So it might be easier if I just went down the list. Would that?
Yes, that would be fine. If you want to go ahead and present to us, then we can take some notes and see where we're at. That would be fine.
Okay, so I mean, it's not going to take me long, to be honest with you, because I have us at leave where we have offered $1 million of leave time.
Oh, I thought we were just doing Volusia Live. We're going to do the whole thing.
There's more. Okay, well, tell us what else then for Volusia Live, because.
Well, I mean, if you want to go that route, I just have to switch documents. That's all.
Okay.
I mean, so you want to do the big, all of it?
I did the big all of it when I charted it.
All right. Well, I have to get a different document prepared then. Hang on one second.
Hey, Rachel, is that shareable, or would you rather not?
I understand. I have a sheet of paper.
Yeah, not a problem. Not a problem.
Sorry.
Okay, so I guess what we need then is the last. So
I think it still might be difficult, Elizabeth, to kind of bounce back and forth between that. I'm going to take notes on this.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, let's just do it the easiest way. All right, so let's start with leave then.
So for leave, we have set aside up to $1 million to be used for administrative leave above and beyond the 10 days provided by FFCRA leave and before sick leave is utilized. And that's where I have that we are.
And that's five paid days, right?
That's 5 paid days.
Okay. Or $1 million, whichever comes first.
Right, that's correct. And then we just talked about Volusia Live. Are there other issues within Volusia Live? Within that language that we had proposed?
Well, sure.
We included the documented medical concerns in our proposal as one of the criteria.
Following the ADA procedures. And then you were working on the secondary paragraph.
Right.
Correct?
And we have something ready to share with that. You ready for me to keep going then? Down to evaluations. Okay. For evaluations, I did look at the November, if we were to push it to November, and that would leave our leave administrators for category 1 14 days to do complete evaluation cycles, which at some sites would be possible, but at the larger sites just wouldn't be possible. An October 1st date would allow them to adequate, because remember, we're talking about that's forcing all of those teachers within that one window to go through their complete evaluation cycles. So we're still at the October 1st date. We do want the steering committee to meet and make recommendations, and we would say that no evaluations for Volusia Live teachers would occur before that date.
So just for clarification purposes, so the VSET steering committee does have the authority to recommend modifications or changes to the evaluation process, correct?
They make recommendations to the rubric itself and the clarifying indicators. As far as, talk to me about process. Are you talking about timelines?
Well, so in my mind, I'm thinking that if we held to the November 2nd date, which is a natural break point, it's the end of the first 9 weeks, which may or may not align with some transition from, if I've got children that are in one option of learning and we get to the end of the 9 weeks because we've toughed it out and we really don't think it's a good fit for us, I'm going to transition. So I think that there's going to be some movement in these classrooms, and I want to give the teachers the opportunity to really get familiar with what they're going to be evaluated on. And so that's why I was trying to preserve that first 9 weeks for all of the changes and differences that we're going to be facing this year, because let's face it, their evaluation is tied to their pay. Well, we know that performance pay isn't as big of a factor this year, but we want to give them the best shot that they can have. So that's why I was thinking or wondering if the VSET steering committee might be able to provide a mechanism that would be able to align with that second grading period. And I know that there is a very condensed window of time, but I'm wondering how many category 1 and 1As would be at each sites. And even if there were a handful of them, are there multiple administrators? And we could look at who's evaluating whom and maybe spread them out a little bit.
I want to add something too, if I could. So Rachel, I don't know the Volusia's process for evaluations all that well, because I just don't. But I want to just add that across the state, we have several counties who are saying that to hold teachers accountable for an evaluation during this time is almost cruel and unusual punishment, because I don't think anybody feels proficient or confident in what we're going to be doing here in the next few months. And so there are many counties who are saying, we'll just use this sort of as a training ground. We'll use this as a feedback opportunity, but we won't actually record this as being something that can be held against them in the future. I would like, I don't know how much of a change this would be to your current system, but maybe a consideration for that, just because we really are setting a lot of people up for failure here. A lot of balls in the air.
Any change like that where we would say we're not going to evaluate, or we would have to be approved by the state. And
I don't think we're going to say we're not going to evaluate. I think it's what we do with that evaluation afterwards. Do we evaluate based on that we're trying to learn a new way moving forward in our world, or do we evaluate with grace and say, you know, this is not a normal time, and so we're going to
right. And that, so if I am understanding you correctly, I think that has more to do with the rubric that we used and those clarifying indicators, which our steering committee does do that work.
Okay, so could we attack it maybe from that department, that angle? I think if we have to go down this road, I think another thing would be then maybe we do not evaluate on Volusia Live. How could that even be fair?
So if I'm a Volusia Live teacher, what are they being evaluated on? Well, like I hear what you're saying, but if we have dedicated teachers.
Well, we still could evaluate them, but it could just be on a, here's feedback. Here's some things that you could do that may help you do this work easier. Here's some things that, we saw you follow. And that information doesn't end up as an evaluation. And next year, someone's looking at it going, oh, you did not do well in this category. It's more for their own growth.
Is that what you're doing? I think maybe let me jump in here real quick, because Tracy's not familiar, like she said, with our system, and I think I understand.
Ours is feedback. That's what.
Yeah. So I think what maybe we're trying to get to is that it's not like so no one coming out of Methods 101 has ever learned how to do Volusia Live. No one with any teaching experience has ever done what we're getting ready to do. I mean, the brick and mortar stuff is traditional-ish, right? Last week, we talked about a lot of changes that we're going to be facing this year. VOL is even enhanced VOL. We've got a significant number of folks that have transferred over to Dr. Peterson's area. So they're going to be experiencing a learning curve. And then we've got Volusia Live, which is really very, very different. So I think what we're trying to find is a method where we could where we could give them feedback on these things that they're doing and their instructional approaches and pedagogy, but do it in a way that is not punitive or would cause them any kind of negative impact going down the road. So, my whole thing that I suggested earlier was make it the year of professional growth, focus on DPPs, do some professional learning. We talked about the old ippy dippy. And if that's not viable, then I think what I hear Tracy saying is we can look at the process the way we have it set up, but we just put a stamp on it that in 2020-21, these were for training purposes. Training purposes not only for the instructional staff who are working through different methods of teaching, and training purposes for administrators who are working through different angles of evaluating. I mean, if I'm an administrator and I've got a dedicated Volusia Live teacher, how am I going to evaluate that person? Am I going to jump on the Teams meeting and evaluate the instruction from the student lens, or am I going to sit in the back of the classroom and watch and evaluate it from, the teacher lens? How are we going to train our administrators to evaluate our folks? I mean, that's going to have to be considered too. I don't think, and I'm not
training piece of it. Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying there. And that piece of it is huge, right? The training piece of it, which is why we need to get the steering committee to convene in September August. If we can get this done real quick, we can get them to start to convene and come up with this. But I really feel like what we're saying is very much the same thing. You and I both saying this, but I'm going at it from the lens that would remember, anything we do to change that plan, or because what I'm hearing you, I think Tracy say is, well, let's not rate them. And I don't think we can.
Yeah, I don't think that's what she's saying. Because I know
we cannot rate them, but we can change the rubric. And with those clarifying indicators that would put that grace and compassion in.
Right.
I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt.
We're going to have to do a little bit of both. I think that for Volusia Live, remember I was looking at the the categories. There are some components of the 22 that won't work in Volusia Live. It doesn't work. So there are some natural occurrences that we're going to have to make. But I think what Tracy was saying, and I'm not trying to put words in her mouth, but not that we don't rate them, but that we rate them and we use it as a reflective process for training purposes only. So remember, one of the things that, as master teachers, what we always try to do is be reflective practitioners. And so maybe for the purpose of evaluations this year, we use the process and we go through the mechanism and the nuts and bolts of it, but we take it and we have a rating, but it doesn't involve any kind of negative consequence. We reflect on it and we say, okay, for this rollout, almost like, remember when we switched from FCAT to FSA and we had that first testing year that was just baseline? Mm-hmm. Same thing happened, I think, with the algebra end of course exams when they were given to 8th graders. Maybe there was a year where the 8th graders took it and it didn't negatively impact them. They still went through it, because I think my son was involved in that.
What negative impacts are we talking about?
Well, I mean, if you have a needs improvement outcome in your evaluation, because this is the first time you've ever done Volusia Live and you're not a techie, and then you have connectivity issues, or your kids don't show up, or someone's cussing in the background on the day your administrator's observing you. I mean, gosh, there's a lot of things I could make up in this moment. I mean,
I understand what you're saying as far as what would lead to that rating, but then what you said was, no, I'm not looking to not rate them. Like, let's rate them, but use it as so what negative, how would, I guess so, what I'm asking, let's say, how would that be so we're not going to use this evaluation to.
So, you get a summative evaluation every year, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say I'll use myself because I'm struggling sharing screens sometimes, right? So I would be a horrible Volusia Live teacher. I would admit that. I'll never work for VOL, forget it. And so I would come in a deficit. And so if I got booted from my school and my principal said, well, the only place you can go is Volusia Online, I'm going to take it because I need to work, right? The Alberts have to eat. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to do my best. But when I'm evaluated, Dr. Peterson's going to say, basic, 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 basic. And so my overall evaluation is going to be very low because this is not my area of expertise, but I had to work. And so this is what I did. But I wouldn't want that. And, I'll get a summative rating, which eventually will play into a bigger picture. But if for this year, there was a mechanism that held my rating out from anything that would follow me. I mean, I'm almost thinking like a VAM too. You know how you have the 3-year file? I'm I wouldn't want anything negative to be attached to evaluations in the coming year that could potentially harm somebody down the road. Almost like what happens with a negative VAM, I guess, in the 3-year file. So and I know that there are some other districts, Indian River is an example, that's already had their plan approved and they've stamped it for training purposes. So if they've already done the work and we can agree that that would be something we'd like to look at, let's just do what they're doing. I mean, if that's already been approved by the state, we can agree that we want to give people grace. Then I think that maybe we just look to see what some of these other districts have done. Something to think about.
Yeah, we can think about it. Well, what I'm thinking about though is I would want that to come from the committee language where we have those people who are on it and the people who are doing it, people in the trenches that are doing it, the teachers and the administrators that are there at that committee making those recommendations. So I'm going to go back to the original question, which was, can the committee make those recommendations? And yes, the conversation we just had and the things that I'm hearing, those are recommendations that the committee can make.
And then now I don't even know when Dr. Fritz is coming back. So when the committee makes the recommendation, then it will go to the acting superintendent to, yes or no.
Correct. That's
That
correct.
doesn't go to the board.
That's correct. Right. The board does approve the evaluation. I'm looking just to make sure I'm right about this. Do they approve our evaluation, or no, the state approves it. It just goes to the state. So it would be our superintendent that would stamp that approval.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you know when, so if the committee meets by October, do you know if Dr. Fritz will be back then, or?
I do think that's the current plan.
August 31st.
Okay, well, that's positive.
August 31st
information.
is what I just heard. So
Oh, that's very good. All right, thank you for that. Maybe that wasn't appropriate to ask. I'm sorry, but that's good information. Glad to know he's doing better. Okay, what's
so
after?
then I have that. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt.
I was ready to move on from evaluations.
So then I have that we both agree that the district will provide access to Teams or Zoom, and that those would be provided by the district. I have that we've agreed to the face mask and to the face mask policy, and face masks and PPE will be required pursuant to policy 503. We've agreed to that. We've agreed to limit visitors on campus. I have that we've agreed to provide PPE and replenish as necessary.
I'm sorry, did we agree that teachers and support staff will not purchase their own supplies? I mean, is that what replenish as necessary translates into?
Yes, that's what yes. Now, I think we had a little bit of discussion about that as far as like, if there's about what personal preferences, but we would provide
Clorox or Lysol. No, we're not doing that. Yeah. Okay.
We've agreed open house will be held virtually. We've agreed on the workshops the district provides to support schools and those site-based plans. We've agreed to limit classroom visitors on campus, and then you had some language about VIEW representatives that were coming in.
Mm-hmm.
We've agreed for the cafeteria will be sanitized between each lunch period and cleaned nightly. We've agreed that we'll follow mandatory and federal guidelines regarding fire drills. We've agreed to the use of that app, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm not going to read all of this, but we've agreed to use that app for any employees to be able to report concerns as far as cleaning and safety goes. We have agreed to making adjustments when it's necessary for the staffing changes to follow Article 15, Section C, which included the 10-day notice. We've agreed that teachers will be given the option to return to their home school from VOL if there is an opening that they're certified for, and if that is what the teacher wants. We've agreed that paraprofessionals and teachers will not be required to utilize platforms that are not provided by the district. They shouldn't be required to attend extracurricular activities, including open house, science night, math night, holidays, those things. We've agreed that should a teacher or paraprofessional volunteer to substitute the current contract language would apply, that they should not use, that no one should be required to use their personal electronic device in the classroom. We've agreed that Volusia Live teachers have access to all the necessary tools. We've agreed that teachers and paraprofessionals should not be responsible for locating their own subs, and that there would be no waivers to be signed. And then we have an offer for a retirement incentive on the table as well. Not agreed to, but we've given that language.
Right.
So I guess what we're asking now is, are there other pieces of the language that we would need to go back that are showstoppers before we present what we've worked on for Volusia Live?
Well, when we submitted a proposal on the 12th, so whatever day that was, maybe it was Wednesday, I can't, who knows. We submitted a proposal, and that was the day that we went to caucus, and then we came back because there were some things that ad hoc section was created that day. There were some items on the proposal that we sent to you that we were interested in discussing. So do you want me to bring those forward now, or do you want me? Okay. Yeah. All right. So one of the things that we wanted to discuss were the Volusia online teachers, so VOL. We wanted to have a discussion about limiting the number of preps for this coming year to 2 preps for the 2020-21 school year.
Okay. Is that just for VOL? Is that what we're talking about?
Well, the other ones would be following contractual language, right?
Oh, right.
Yeah, right. Okay. Here, tell me when you're ready.
I'm ready. I'm here. I just had to walk over to the, okay.
Okay. All right. So I'm going through the list. Okay. We wanted to make sure that the teachers.
I'm going to have to find out about that because I don't know. I don't know where they are with that. I know they're staffing crazy right now, so I can find out.
Just since we're talking about VOL, we're anticipating more positions to be uploaded today, because I went on this morning and I didn't see a whole lot.
Yes, we are.
Okay. All right. So then we wanted to make sure that teachers and staff would not be required to attend any meetings at another site during the year. We don't want them traveling from site to site. And I know you mentioned workshops. We agreed that workshops would be provided virtually. There's a lot of conversation about the state mental health training and the fact that those are being face-to-face. Can we talk about that?
We can talk about it. That is the requirement.
Right. So is it the requirement because it was mandated like 2 years ago and no one planned for COVID? I mean, is there a way to get it done virtually?
We tried. We went to the state and asked for permission to do it virtually, and that was denied. They told us that it must be a face-to-face training.
Okay. So then I would ask that we, and I know there were some calls made already today, but I'm hearing that there are a lot of big groups coming together to do that training, convening, because I guess there's a limitation on the number of facilitators maybe. So let's say if I have a school with 100 employees, I'm doing 2 groups of 50 because I only have 2 facilitators. That doesn't seem.
Are they in an area where it's big enough to socially distance? I mean, I
know. And what you're saying. In some schools, I'm hearing that they are not. And I'm also hearing that some facilitators are asking for group activities to occur during the training. So I don't know how we would do that, but let's not get caught up there. I'm just
agreed. Can I ask though, you brought up not required to attend meetings at another site. Is that, do you mean the model that we used to use where like if there was a workshop or something at another site, or is this specific to, because VOL does have the requirement to come in to meet from time to time. It's certainly not a regular thing, but.
Right, but I think that Dr. Peterson has a way to socially distance them, but I know that she's collapsed the ambassador visits that they used to have where they were mandated to go to schools at least twice a week or something. She's collapsed that for the purposes of COVID. And so we want to make sure that that stays that way until, COVID goes away.
Okay. I see what you're saying.
That's what I'm talking about. Also, I'm thinking too, and hopefully it'll be long gone before the end of the school year, but articulations and things like that for gifted and ESE. I know sometimes our teachers travel to different schools for those articulations. We would ask that those be convened virtually for the purpose of, transitioning the kids. And I think pre-K does some of that too, don't they? Pre-K to kindergarten?
Yeah.
Yeah, but we just like to, as virtual as much as possible until we get a handle on things. Okay, so we wanted to revisit the conversation, particularly for ESE case managers and related service providers, wanting to make sure that they are afforded the opportunity to do all of their record keeping electronically, and that we're not adding on additional paperwork responsibilities to them. I think yeah, let's just leave the conversation there. We don't want to add additional paperwork on to ESE folks during this time.
Okay.
Let's see. Going through my list. Okay, we don't want members of the bargaining unit monitoring students that have COVID symptoms. We wanted to,
Did you explain what we meant by that?
no, you can.
Okay, I can envision there being like an overflow in wherever it is that the nurse will be having these folks. We don't want a teacher who says, okay, you go down because you just told me that you're feeling sick or whatever. You go down to the nurse. We don't want kids sit back up and say, we don't have any room right now, so hold on to them until we get to them. We'll call for them or something. Once a kid is identified as either being symptomatic or exposed, we want them removed from the situation like immediately.
Sure. And I think I need to look within the language, but that's why we had put that they needed to identify an isolation room on each camp. And what you're saying, Tracy, like, it almost reminds me, I think it was Mr. Persis who said, you can't put common sense in a plan. And of course we wouldn't. I understand what you're saying. Let me think about a way to word that, but that makes sense. We wouldn't want to send a symptomatic kid back to class for sure, or put them in an area where, I mean, that's why we had asked every campus to identify an isolation room.
And so who will monitor the isolation room?
We have the school nurses on campus to monitor that.
Okay. And do we have nurses at every site?
We do.
Impressive.
We have some healthcare. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so we wanted to.
They're not necessarily RNs, but we have a healthcare person.
Okay, so, all right, where'd we go? All right, so in no circumstances do we want to allow teachers or paraprofessionals to be videotaped when they're providing instruction through Volusia Live. And we want to ask that if a student does in fact videotape during Volusia Live, that the student will be subject to discipline according to the school's code of conduct or discipline policies.
Do we not have that currently?
I have to check the policies.
We submitted it. I didn't hear that you had agreed to that.
Okay.
I know there was conversation about if they refused to wear their mask, that there would be some.
Well, I meant just in general, if a student is videoing, I thought there was a discipline, but I can check on that.
Joy, is there a disciplinary process when students videotape teachers? I don't think that there is.
Well, it's in the code of conduct that they're not supposed to be doing a recording of other students or staff. It's in the code of conduct.
So I would think, so if you just want clarification that would apply, like the code of conduct applies to Volusia Live.
Yeah, that would be good. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
wonderful. And then we also asked that the district would provide an attorney to represent a teacher or paraprofessional if a parent brings forth any kind of charge or litigation over lessons, materials, or discussions that arise out of Volusia Live. Looking at Mr. Penley.
Yeah, you know me well, yeah.
And we don't normally provide that because the teachers are immune, the qualified immunity from any business related thing, but we can see what the language is.
Could we put in a statement that just says teachers and paraprofessionals? I want to make sure paras get some safety nets here too, that have qualified immunity, using his language, that would protect them from any potential whatever. Could we do something like that?
Yeah, it applies to all employees, so happy to include it.
That would be great. Thank you. And then again, we wanted something in there about, if a student continuously fails to participate in Volusia Live, whether they're not signing on, whether they're not completing lessons, or behaving appropriately, that the employee shall not be disciplined or evaluated negatively based on the student's actions.
Okay.
Get almost done.
I understand. Okay.
All right.
Let me think about that. I see both sides to that. So, I mean, I certainly wouldn't, listen, I understand. I would not want to hold a teacher or anyone responsible for, because I know that largely when they're at home, and I saw this during the implementation, I was serving as a school principal during the implementation of the ICP. And I saw teachers go way above and beyond the call of duty to get those kids engaged. And I mean, I know that they went way above and beyond. And of course, we wouldn't ever hold them responsible for a parent or a guardian's failure to implement what we've pretty much handed them on a silver platter. Here, just do this and we'll count you present. But there are also certain mechanisms that you have in place that when that doesn't happen, like they meet the minimum requirement of trying to contact the parents. So I just kind of want to think about that. That's not a no, it's just I want to think about.
Sure. Well, we could even say
what is reasonable effort, you know?
2 attempts, we can start there.
Okay.
2 attempts to contact the parent and through whatever platform they're using.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, let me think about reasonable effort, and then we can look at that.
Right, and maybe when you look at that, maybe we have some kind of chain of command. So if I'm the classroom teacher and I'm making attempt after attempt to contact the parent and I'm getting nowhere, maybe at some point we trigger administrative intervention. Maybe an administrator then takes over after I make a certain number of attempts.
Yeah.
Does that sound fair?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Then we wanted to talk about class size caps for Volusia online teachers. We mentioned this last time we spoke. We know that Volusia online elementary classes, we're asking that they be capped 30 for primary and 35 for intermediate. And we're asking that VOL secondary classes should be capped at 180 students per teacher.
What are the current class sizes, do we know? We're going to get the current staffing formula.
At the allocations, we did look at it. For VOL.
And I know it seems like I'm talking forever, but this is my shot, so I'm going to take it. So
no, I want to do that. This is what we want. I want to come back with this is what we can do, because I know you're as anxious as we are to get this.
I know. And
if we can get close, let's do it. So
listen, Rachel, you and I both know how we're going to get there, right? All right, so let's do this. So
what about temperatures? Did we ever come to any agreement on taking temperatures?
We proposed language.
We proposed some language to you all for the temperature checks.
Well, I thought so.
We agreed to not require. I think that was our last proposal.
Okay, so if you agreed to not require bargaining unit employees to take temperatures, that's good. Did we agree that that's not a supplemented duty?
No, I don't think we've agreed to that yet.
I do need to throw out we already have supplements in the contract, so we can't add another supplement or subtract from a supplement and that without it being bargained. Supplements are already listed.
Well, we have a supplemental duty that is a supplemental duty. I think it's called level 1. Is it level 1? Where it is more of an open-ended, and you write the contract, and on the supplemental form, you write between the principal and the person signing the supplement. I am a little curious as to what the objection to paying someone to perform a duty is.
Well, we have to negotiate that pay. So in other words, to us, taking temperatures would be a high hazard, in our opinion. I mean, unions are all about the safety. And so that one we would place a high value upon. So it needs to be, that has to be bargained.
And if you're talking about under Class B, Rachel, under the extended duty supplements, because there are extended duty 1, 2, and 3, those extended duty items are articulated on page 66 under N. And those are either a loss of a contract identified duty-free lunch period, loss of contract identified planning time, or a documented minimum average of 2.5 hours per week beyond the regular work week. So I don't know that temperatures would fall into any of those criteria, because the 2.5 hours is typically for, gosh, like a committee appointment or something like that.
Yeah.
There is another, like other, I've got it pulled up. That's why I'm kind of looking away right now. There is an other line on there.
Where are you looking?
Are you looking at the supplement performance order, Rachel?
I am, yeah.
Oh, you're on the, well, not in the contract.
Yeah, that's just an internal document that's got, if it changes the conditions of the language, then we would have to be included. Your internal document doesn't change the language and the way it, the way that it's executed.
See, and the way I think about that other would be like that additional duty that's the 2.5 hours beyond the regular work week. So what other are you doing? A chess club or something, or I don't know. But that's how I think makes sense of that other under an additional duty supplement. So maybe 30 minutes a day I'm doing something.
Okay, so what we're hearing, and I hope you don't take, because I don't mean this in any way other than what we're hearing. What we're hearing is we don't want people to have the opportunity to get paid for that. So,
well, I guess you could interpret it that way, but what we're trying to express is that we believe that taking temperatures for, taking temperatures is a health risk. That's what we believe. And so in Article 5, we do have that health and safety language, and we believe it falls up under there. We know that and I get it. I mean, if the procedure is that we've got to take temperatures, I know that we're trying to help administrators out and figure out a way to get it done. I get that, right? And offering a supplement would be a logical avenue to explore, but it's not a supplemented duty. And we don't want our folks being put at that level of risk. We just don't think it's appropriate. Aren't parents supposed to check their kids before they come to school?
Yes. Yeah.
And do you know, are other districts taking temperatures? My information seems to be that maybe other districts aren't mandating.
Well, I don't know county by county. I have seen, and I know that plans have changed right up until the last minute for several counties, just because the guidelines keep changing. However, I don't really want to go down that rabbit hole again, but we can if you want. But I know that it was one of those things that we put in as another precaution for everyone. So we have advertised and put out there, parents should check their kids. Do not send your kids to school with their temperature. And this was another safety measure, and we have had discussion about whether to continue or not continue, or do random checks, or do and right now the way we have it is we'll check everybody that comes in. But
well, and I think I shared at one point along the journey that I had a teacher contact me about her husband and her son They never had fevers.
Right. And I know this is not the only thing we can put in place that's going to, it's just one thing that could help. It certainly wasn't our answer.
Right.
To the problem. And we did purchase specifically the thermometers where you can stay back a safe distance and check the temperature, which is why we didn't consider it a health risk, because we've purchased.
I lost you.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know what happened. I've even gone to schools this week and had my own temperature taken through the glass. And it worked fine.
Really?
Yes. Yes.
Well,
I registered. Well, I'll just say this. The temperature that I took myself at a building and then went to a school and had my temperature taken through the glass was the same temperature. So I know it worked.
Well, that's interesting. I would like to think about that, barrier thing.
Mm-hmm.
But no precaution is too. Every precaution I want to be considered to keep our folks safe, and I know you do too. So that's where this is coming from. We just want to make sure that we are as safe as possible. And
so, I mean, we're not opposed to language that is. I mean, I understand, especially if we have clerical who are just more susceptible or some special circumstance. Like, of course, I've talked to principals across the county who said, well, I wouldn't, just because I know the health risk of a certain individual. We're not opposed to language that says we're not going to require, but what we know is that if we want that measure in place, which is above and beyond, we're going to have to make that we're going to have to solicit some help from somewhere.
Now, listen, we're having a good conversation today, and we're being real we're
playing nice. Yeah.
So here's the thing. So if we're going to talk about being overly cautious and going above and beyond, do you want to talk about social distancing?
We can. I want to finish talking about temperatures first.
Yeah. Because we can't have it both ways, right? If we're going to really commit to putting every precaution out there and affording everybody the opportunity to be as safe as possible, then I think that we should probably revisit the social distance conversation, because it's all so very, very important, because we don't know what we're up against.
Can the district look at an investment of those temperature readers that you don't have to have someone standing there? You walk by. I've seen them in some places, and they're probably very expensive, but do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do know what you're talking about. We're looking at each other because we did look into those. I wasn't part of that, but Deb, you weren't you? So.
Well, I think anything we could afford is inaccurate for that purpose. I think that they're too cost prohibitive if they were really accurate. I mean, for us to get one like for every entrance in every school.
I do remember Mr. Aiken talking about that, and there were several concerns with the models that we looked at.
So cost prohibitive is probably the issue there. I don't know how much they are. I'm sure they're expensive.
No, there were some that weren't cost prohibitive, but they weren't really accurate. So in other words, you get what you pay for.
But what are we using as the alternative? I mean, those 65...
We're using the thermometers that they're like a gun, really. You stand back, you can stand back, and I mean, I think infrared, they use it every morning. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. Infrared thermometers.
So take me through this. How many people are we talking about doing that at one time? It seems like we need a lot.
Side to side. I've got one school where they're anticipating having 150 students, and so I think 2 people on site could get that done very, very quickly. But then I've got larger campuses. Well, Dr. Niereg, how many students are you anticipating?
He's not on.
Oh,
He had another
Mr.
meeting.
Cash, how many students are you anticipating?
That's a great question, isn't it?
Mhm.
We anticipate on campus anywhere from 700 plus.
And so you would need, have you done the math yet to see about how many people you would need?
Well, it's not just a matter of people, it's also a matter of location, because you have students coming off buses, you have students coming in from the bike rack, you have students coming in the front gate. They're all monitored, but you have students coming in from different positions.
So it also goes back, and this is more of a discussion, but so you have a kid who tests and they just got off of a bus. We know what that's going to do right there. Now we've got all the kids, the other 70 kids on the bus now were exposed. So I don't know. I'm just trying to wrap my head around how efficient this is going to be. Is it, and I mean, it seems like something we need to do, but I can't wrap my head around how to get it done without putting people in harm's way and without it being too late. I mean, by the time some kids rode together and, with their buddies rode their bikes together and they stopped 13 times on the way in, like my boys used to do, to chat and look at whatever they've got in their pockets, they've already exposed each other.
So I think, and I'm certainly not the expert on this, but I know someone who is the expert that I could get this information to. But my understanding of it is that if I'm on the bus and I get exposed, although we are using some form of social distancing and guidelines as far as wearing masks and different and PPE on the bus. But let's say there is a child on the bus who is symptomatic and contagious. I think this goes back to, when do you then become a carrier and a spreader? And I don't know that that's immediately after contact. It's just finding.
Yeah, but that seems, I mean, would that be okay with you? I mean, that wouldn't, if my child was on that bus and somebody said, well, I don't know if he's a carrier or a spreader.
I thought we were talking about the person who's taking the temperature if they're at risk, right? Like, so what I'm saying is, if I'm sitting in close proximity with Deb right now, which I'm probably about just 6 feet away from Deb right now, and I've got on a mask and she's got on a mask, and I walk, and she has COVID, and I walk out of this room, I thought we were talking about, am I contagious to the person the minute I walk out of this room who's taking my temperature? Is that?
Well, I'm not a doctor. I don't know.
Right, I'm not either, and that's what I'm saying, but I don't know.
But the thing about it is, because we aren't medical professionals, I think that's why we have to be ultra conservative when we make these decisions, and we have to be super.
And I want to go back to, that's why when we created these plans, we did have medical professionals in the Department of Health on the committee who put these plans in place.
Well, and we know that Miss Boswell absolutely committed to that 6 feet at the school board meeting, right? So if we're going to take some of their recommendations, we really need to take all of them.
Without the use of PPE.
No, she was actually talking in the moment about being on the school bus too. Mm-hmm. And her conversation was, if we want to stop the spread of the virus, we have to maintain the 6 foot distance. Why don't we just move on from temperatures, if it's okay? Because I feel like there's way more things I want to say. Well, there's a few more things I want to say. And then I'd like to give Matt a chance to share some work that we did on the retirement.
That works for me. So I have taken notes about all that you have said.
Well, I wasn't done.
We can come back, but I'm hearing there's other.
Well, there was just a couple more things on Volusia Live, because we were specific to Volusia Live, right? So if I could wrap Volusia Live up, and then we'll jump.
To Matt. Okay.
Yeah. Because, we just wanted to go back. We had a discussion about this briefly, but we didn't send anything across. But I wanted to make sure that Volusia Live would not be used for the purposes of discipline for either in or out of school suspension. We talked about that a little bit last week, but we've never passed that language. So that's something we've been thinking a lot about. So we want to put that out there.
Elizabeth, you want to clarify that a little bit? I think I understand, but go ahead and.
Right. So if I'm in Miss Hazel's brick and mortar class and I just lose control one day and I get 5 days out of school suspension, I should not be enrolled in Miss Hazel's Volusia Live class so that I'm right back with her.
Got
You know
you.
what I mean?
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, good. And then
What was that talked about? Can I just clarify something on that? I know what you're saying as far as like if I get suspended for a huge disruption or there's something like that, but are we going then with the, because I think I heard this at a school board meeting where if I don't follow the face mask policy, I would be asked to join.
That's not discipline.
That's a different. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's because brick and mortar is not working for you. So we're going to ask you to consider the
So
other
we agree that that's not okay.
Right, that was a re-enrollment, I thought. And then the last one that I'll submit to you is, I started down this road, but I didn't think I got there. Speech and language pathologists, SLPs.
Mm-hmm.
We would ask that they shall not do face-to-face and Volusia Live simultaneously. They should have a dedicated Volusia Live service provider, and I'm hoping that they've also been given a dedicated SLP to Volusia online learning now that they've expanded so greatly.
We'll check.
You'll check. Okay, good. All right. That was all that I had on that. We do have some paperwork, if you will, or proposal for the retirement. I don't know if we want to do the numbers first and then I'll share the language. Matt needs to have the ability to share his screen though, if we can give him that. And while we're doing that, oh, and I did leave out, I'm sorry, I left out ESE folks on Volusia Live. Where did I'm sorry. I had some notes. Oh, I'm sorry, there is a couple more. Special area real quick, with our special area teachers at elementary expected to do brick and mortar and Volusia Live simultaneously? Are they separated?
No, they're separated. What we've told our elementary principals is that Volusia Live teachers would be included on the special area schedule. So like if Christina and Amber and I are the third grade team and I'm the Volusia Live teacher, then I would have my slot on the special area schedule as Volusia Live. So when it's my turn to go to art, that would be a Volusia Live model. So they're not doing it at the same time.
All right, but it's not like we're going to dedicate a whole day to Volusia Live. Like I might have all Volusia Live all day, and then third grade is brick and mortar. Like I might have K1, 2, 4, 5 Volusia Live on Wednesday, but third grade Wednesday rotation has me.
Could be brick and mortar, correct.
Okay. All right. Getting some questions about walk to intervention in elementary. Are we going to do a walk-to model?
We're working on that.
Go ahead. Dr. Raimundo has something to say.
Elizabeth, we are working on that right now, and we're going to have some language specific to how that's going to look.
Okay, and then I guess would that be similar with, are you also working on departmentalized?
Yes, ma'am, because we have received many questions about what departmentalization is going to look like in elementary. So we are working on that. Those are two hotbeds that we are definitely looking at today.
All right, and then I guess support facilitation would also be tucked up in there, and ESOL and all those traveling folks, right?
Yes, ma'am.
All righty, thank you, Dr. Raimundo.
You're welcome.
I think that's it for me right now. Matt, if you're ready.
Okay. The same screen we're all used to. Am I off mute?
Yep.
Okay. Same thing going on here. What we looked at is we talked last week about being cost neutral, but so one of the things that looking at this is like the district saves a lot of money, but that's assuming that this row is true, which is you're under 62-year-olds. So I'm sure that Ms. Mueller is probably thinking similar to me is that like they're not likely to retire. So that savings amount is probably not going to happen, which is why we ended up coming back with the 17.5%. We wanted to include everybody again, so we didn't want to exclude those and drop. And so at 17.5%, if I take those under 62 out, it shows that the district is still saving money. The district is saving money at 17.5% without those under 62. If we leave those in, the school district ends up saving a lot of money for those under 62. So I guess that was our recognition, or was that those who are in the drop program are likely to retire, or more likely to retire than those who are under 62. So we countered back with the 17.5%, which saves money for the district. We removed the health care addition to that contract, and then we want to include all of the teachers and paras, everyone, regardless of drop status, for 17.5%. I did have one question. So I got your documents about the terminal leave. It would be great if you could send those as Excel documents instead of PDFs. PDFs are really difficult to navigate and put into Excel documents. Copy and paste doesn't work very well. And so I was looking through that, but it's difficult. What I noticed is I can look at the codes and see which school or which department they're coming from, but there may be like 8 people within a school who are in drop. And so I don't know which salary and which terminal leave applies to which person, which makes it really difficult, if not impossible, to create these calculations more succinctly. For instance, one of the very first person on that terminal leave works in the office of the superintendent. So I don't know if they're even part of VIEW, or if they are something. I just don't know, I guess, because I don't know which person that associates with.
Right. Well, I mean, and those are people that we've already paid out. Those are people that we paid out this year. Well, actually last year, and then the amount, there's not detail actually on the ones that we paid out this fiscal year for last year. So that was just because Tracy had asked for the details of where she could find that information. I don't know that I shared anything with the terminal leave of the people that are on this spreadsheet that would possibly retire. Okay, that was our actual, she wanted to see what our actual expense was, and that's what I provided.
That makes a lot more sense now. I appreciate that. That makes, because I was wondering why I couldn't connect last year's, because even if it was this year's, if there was 5 people at Mainland High School who were in drop, there should have been 5 people on your Excel document in drop, and the numbers weren't aligning. So that makes more sense that it's last year's people. Okay. So that's last year's budget, and that's the one you said you went over around $700,000.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, that's what I had sent over. So I have the analysis of all the people that are on the spreadsheets that I would have to share with you.
Perfect. And if you could send that as an Excel, it makes my life 1,000 times easier, because it's really difficult with the PDF.
Okay, are you giving this to us in the form of an actual proposal across the table?
Yes, I have that for you.
Elizabeth Albert has that, and this is just the same document I've been using. I just added a couple more columns. I added in like average salary of teachers, average savings per person. So I just added a couple more columns. And I can send this on if you'd like, but it's basically the same thing.
Okay, sure, that'd be good. Thank you.
All right, so I do have a document that I can show you. You probably already know what to expect here, but I'll show it to you. Okay, so it's the same old one we've been using. Again, we want to include everyone who is retirement eligible, removing that 36-month eligibility. We've showed you this language before. An employee who's separated from the district prior to the signing of the MOU, MOA, whatever we call it, would not be eligible. And then we took out the health insurance subsidy. And so we're proposing 17.5%. We're keeping the longevity. And we may have to, depending on how quickly we move here, we may have to revisit this date and time. But I've left it in for the purpose of the conversation today, hoping that we can move this forward. You know, it's really important to us to, and I know it is to you, to offer something to our folks who are ready or who could consider leaving at this time because of just the circumstances, who otherwise might have had more time to give, but are very concerned. And I know we've had the conversation before. So I hope you recognize that it was a big step for us to remove that insurance premium because that's a big give on our part. I know we've talked about the give and take of bargaining. So,
well, yes, and I do recognize that, and I think, you know, the conversation about we wouldn't even be talking about this had it not been for COVID, and it's more to offer a benefit for those people that, you know, really don't want to return because of whatever health issue or age or whatever. So I think we both recognize that this is a special circumstance.
Right. And I appreciate that. So I'll send that over to you.
Can I ask a question? Deb, so we are going to tell people that if they think about doing this, we need them to be move very cautiously. So if someone were to call you up and say, what would this mean for me? Would you be able to plug them in and give them like, maybe not you personally, but give them an exact example of what this would mean for them financially?
Yeah, we have a person that handles our retirement processes and consults with anybody who's considering retiring.
Okay, because I think that we, you know, for those people who are watching right now, we need to say it loud and clear. This is not going to include the health insurance, so they need to be very cautious moving through this.
Right.
Okay, I'll send that over to you guys when we're done.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And thanks, Matt. Okay, so here we are.
I think what we would like to do is go back and take a look at this and send you over the proposal tomorrow. Actually, I think probably we'll want to present it to you. I know we meet tomorrow early, but I'm hoping that if we did look at the Volusia Live language, we did make some changes to it. We'll be ready to present that tomorrow. You've given us some other things that we'd like to consider to include, and then we would be ready to present about where we could be tomorrow.
Okay. So we'll
reconvene
at 11:30, and maybe, I don't know how much time Deb will have to look at the retirement as well. But I'm almost wondering for the purposes of the retirement, maybe like we did, if we can agree on the retirement, and if we're still working on the other things, I wonder if maybe we set that out separately, just like we did the early release time, just so we can get folks in the pipeline, because every day that they return to their schools for our folks is another day of risk. And then it's really not fair to the administrators if these folks really do want to consider this and go. We don't want administrators scrambling to fill those spots.
Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah, we want to do that too, but we're hoping we can get there with all of it by tomorrow. So.
Yeah, I hope so too. So, all right, well, very good. Then we'll just, we'll see you in the morning then, I suppose. And I'll send this over.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Can we go to the breakout room for our people?
Yes, please.
Thank you.